As I was introduced, my name is Zainal, Muhammad Zainal Abdin, very long name, but you can call me Zainal. I'm a senior principal consultant in Singapore. I am also the head of section. She's actually my counterpart in Korea. I have a background in naval architecture, shipbuilding actually, welding inspection, things like that. And then I've changed my career in between, and I'm now taking care of risk advisory kind of business because of the background in occupational health and safety that I had. I have been doing this now for, I'm very shy to say, 30 years. And yeah, I'm still going strong. Today, I'm talking to you about ISRS, International Sustainability Rating System. Now it's edition 9, so it's been around longer than I have been alive actually, back in the 60s. Yeah? When ISRS started, the IS was safety. But over the years, we change, we improve, we do better. So from safety, you include health, HS. Then you include environment, HSE. Then as we progress, we want to cover more, quality, right? Then you talk about process safety, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, in edition 7, we decided to change the S to sustainability because it covers many things. Why you want to cover many things? You look at these words here. What we want in a world that we, as an operator, as a manufacturer, as a service provider, at the end of the day, your end customer, the public, everybody in general, wants to see you reduce people who are absent from work because of accidents or ill health. You want to have 0 major events. Yeah? A good major event is when you tell the world, we are number 1 for safety, we are number 1 for, as an employer. You don't want to have, we are number 1 because we have many explosions, fatality. We don't want that kind of major events. Yeah? We don't want accidents. We don't want any defects in the quality of the work that you produce. You are manufacturers of plastics or manufacturing equipment, or you provide a service for transportation. You don't want to have any customer complaints. You don't want any release of hazardous material in the atmosphere, right? You don't want any waste, security incidents, any breakdowns in operations. You want to reduce or hit a net 0 carbon emission. You want to have 0 loss of knowledge. Knowledge is important, right? People leaving and taking the information with them because you don't train the people, or you don't have a process in place to manage your knowledge. And of course, ultimately, whatever you do, you don't want to impact the community, because actually your families, your children, right, they are the community. Yeah? You work around the community, and you don't want any adverse impact. So, the idea using ISRS is essentially a means to review your process. Many times when I do my assessment for ISRS, people say, oh, it's like ISO audit. Yes and no. An ISO audit tells you, do you have A? Yes or no? If yes, pass. ISRS is a little bit more different. It looks at your processes in depth. It gives you means to improve the processes that you have. When I say process, it's your management system, safety management system, quality management system, health management system, knowledge management system, any management system, essentially. And we say world-leading process. And there is another competitor who do the same thing, but their process is slightly different. And why are we world-leading? Because we have been working with a lot of companies worldwide. It started out as a process to manage oil and gas companies. Oil and gas, your SK Chemicals, GS Caltex, Chevron, Shell, ExxonMobil. But it has diversed into many, many industries. It's not an oil and gas tool. All right? And in the time where it first started until now, it has changes. And it's continually changing. And we have a process in place to share the changes to our customers. So it's not something stagnant. It's not static. It's very dynamic. What ISRS does is essentially talks to you about your business process. Every time they say, oh, this is a safety audit. It's not a safety audit. It's a management system assessment. An audit tells you what you do right, what you do wrong, finish. ISRS takes that one step further. We look at what you do very well. And we tell you what you're doing well. Why? Because this is seen from the process, from the lens of this assessment process. And you can see what you're doing well, and you can share to other units, other departments, other facilities. This is doing well in facility A, and you should do this way. This is how we have our success. But we also look at what you can do better, opportunities for improvement. Not what you do badly, but what you can do better, because you're doing something, right? So we recognize that fact, but what can you do more? And on top of that, when we identify all these processes, we also give you recommendations. We don't say, this is not good, don't do this. And then do what? So the ISRS process, built in by DNV, also has a requirement to provide recommendations. We don't let you go blindly. Yes? Now, ultimately, the whole idea is find what you do well, find what you need to improve, give recommendation, and improve your process. Improve. Do better. Because there's always something more you can do better. Change and tweak. Yeah? And also, with these results, you can show to stakeholders, government, the board, your employees, we have done well in this, we have done well in this. And this is how you show real facts, not just words, numbers to define how well you do. Yeah? It's not just a means or a tool to tell you yourself that you're doing well, but to tell key stakeholders how well you are doing things. Now, these are the processes that we will assess using ISRS. If you look at it closely, it's actually no different than your standard management systems. They will have coverage for leadership, the policy. If you look at your quality management system, first item is policy, which is what we call as leadership. Right? And then you have your strategy, also under leadership, under policy. You have human resource, which covers training. You will see compliance, legal register. It's just different names for the same thing. Hence, we are able to assess any management system that is out there. Because every company thinks of itself as unique. Why must I follow? You don't have to. If you follow, it's easier for you moving forward, but you don't have to. That's how easy it is for us to assess any management system out there. However, there's a difference when you look at risk, which we take very high focus on. You will notice risk has three elements here, or three processes as we call it. The first one, number 3, risk evaluation or identification. Then you can see number 9, risk control. And number 14, risk monitoring. We believe risk is very important. Not just safety risk, health risk, quality risk, business risk, knowledge management risk. Every single activity that you do, there is risk. So you need to first find out what is the risk. And then put the control measures in place for those risks that is identified. And then you monitor whether you see your control measures works or not. However, with this difference, everything else is more or less the same. You also see something different about number 13, learning from events. This is what we call investigation process. Any incident that occurs is an event. Most of the time, you investigate incidents that happen when you have a loss or a potential loss. But we advocate for you to investigate the good things as well. Why you do so well? Investigate. Find out. That's why we call it learning from events instead of accident investigation. However, the idea behind it is still the same. But everything else, quite straightforward. Asset integrity, contractor management. And it all follows a PDCA cycle. Everybody knows what's PDCA. Plan, do, check, and act, evaluate, PDCA. Yeah? And you can see from the colors, policy and strategy, gray on top. Yeah? Then the light blue, planning. Darker blue, implementation and operation. Then the slightly darker blue, monitoring and measurement, and then you do have the review process, and it's a full cycle. So it's nothing new. So when you look at ISRS, you don't think of it something different that you need to change your process. You do not. All right? That's the beauty of our process here. What it does is looking at an overlay. At the bottom is your business process, your normal things that you do as an organization. Whether it's managing the input of your business, the transformation, or the results, or the ultimate reputation, things like that, and also what are the resources and controls that are in place. But what we are looking is on top, how you manage every one of these boxes and arrows. This is a means to show you as a template for the best practices that you can apply. Best practices of what, you ask? If you look at ISRS, it looks at the templates for multiple dimensions. The H, the S, the Q, the E, the S for security. The materials management. What is material management? We're talking about managing what is your waste, what you use in terms of energy, right? Asset integrity. Yeah? Energy management, knowledge, and finally, social responsibility. So with this one management system evaluation process, you are able to evaluate all this. When our customers or potential customers look at this, there's so many things you're covering, it means there's so many questions. That's true, there's many, many questions, there's thousands of questions. But our process use a software, online software, which we will give access to our customers, that will allow you to pick. I only want to assess HSE, or only process safety. And then only these questions will come out, and you are able to be assessed or assessed internally. The questions are provided. The questions are based on internationally accepted best practices and standards. All right, you can see here, 45K, 14K, 9,000, 55,000, 50,000, OSHA 19.10.119, which is process safety requirements of the US. And similar to this is the Surveyor 3 directive. These are all process safety requirements, but from two parts of the world, typically. If you look at process safety, it's either, and safety regulations, it's either prescriptive or non-prescriptive. Typical US requirements is prescriptive. How many people is allowed to be in this room? 200 of this size, this very prescriptive. You don't follow this, you're in violation. However, on the other side, if you look at the European or the UK requirements, is non-prescriptive. How many people is safe to sit in this room? Do a risk assessment. You say, I have this much space, I have this air exchange, I can put 500. Because you have made your risk assessment and you have evaluated and you define it that way. So that's a non-prescriptive regulations, the requirement. And all these regulations, the requirement, are put in questions and given scores. And you put the score. Like I mentioned before, in ISO, the regulation states, or the requirement states, do you have this process? Yes, no. Yes, no. Done. But how good is that? How well is that? With ISRS, do you have this process? Yes. Okay. You have 1 point for that. 1 score. How long have you had this process for? If it's less than 3 months, you don't have any score. Why? Because you need to make sure if you have a procedure, a process, a requirement for keeping things safe, it needs to be communicated to everyone. And we, as part of our more than 40 over years in terms of using this kind of requirements, we notice that if it's not in place no more than 3 months, it's not effective. So we have a 3 months requirement. So if it's in place for 3 months, we will give you credit for the activity. But not that alone. You also must make sure that 90% of your population understand. So we have also required a 90% requirement. Meaning, if this procedure is given to 10 people to be used, and is in place for 3 months, and 9 of those 10 people understand, then you get the score. Then you get credit. That's the main difference between ISRS and a standard audit. We don't just say, oh, you have this, you have that. We need to see clearly if it's effectively put in place. Why do you need to do this? This is a means and ways to give a score and tell whether this department compared to this department, what is the difference? Who is doing better in which element, which process? And you can compare this with other organizations within your company or compare with other companies. So there's a next step beyond that. When you look at ISRS, it applies across the board in terms of the PDCA cycle, right? Identify, analyze, evaluate, and strategize. When you talk about communicating the 390 requirement, we want you to make sure you are communicating and implementing. Hence the 390 rule. Have you communicated your requirements to everybody in your organization? Or I do the procedure, I send you by email. Is email effective? Yes and no. If most of your population are working behind a desk and you send out an email, you require an acknowledgement for them to read everything, maybe it works. But if you have a factory or an operations floor, not everybody has email access. Certain facilities, you can't even bring your handphones inside. Why? It's not explosion-proof, it's not safe. So how do you effectively communicate? As a requirement within ISRS, when I do an assessment or when we do an assessment, when we see how you communicate, we look at communications from the top down, meaning I tell you what to do. I'm the boss, you work for me, do this. That's telling. Is it good? Maybe. Sometimes people don't listen, right? Then that's one set of score. What is the way to do better? Maybe we want to communicate. This is the problem I have. What do you think is the problem? What is the best solution? So we have top-down and bottom-up approach. We get input. Because I tell you what you need to do as a manager, as a management. But the people doing the work, they know better. They feel the pain. I have to walk very long to go to that place. I have to carry heavy things. It's very hot. It's very cold. As a manager, I don't see this. As a worker, they see it, so they can communicate. When they communicate, you find a solution. So that's a communication way of providing the information and ensuring that people are putting the practices in place as it should be. Then you have a better score. How about co-creating, which is the highest? Meaning, you, as the employee, tell me what's the best way to do these things. So it's a co-creation part of score. So when we look at all these different aspects, we are able to score whether between a low-performing organization to a high-performing organization. We notice that a high-performing organization always works together with the people as a group, as a family, so to speak. A low-performing organization tends to have somebody telling you what to do and you just follow. Good or bad, follow. We don't want that. We want people who are communicating back. improving. That's how you do things better. So ISRS allows you to identify processes and practices which are either co-creating or just telling. Yep. And then when you do this, you identify this, we are also able to identify how well you're doing things. When you do your risk assessment, risk number 1, this is the risk, this is the hazard, this is the control measures. Is the control measures good or not good? You need to identify. You must have a process in place to see, to monitor. Right? Typically, if you are talking about a simple thing, workplace where walking from point A to point B, the control measure is to put a barrier so that people are not in contact with moving vehicles. Just give you a simple example. Is this working, yes or no? When you go there and you look at the area, you notice the barrier is always getting hit. So people are afraid to walk. Right? So the monitoring activities is part of your day-to-day inspections, right? And you see, oh, this is not working. Maybe we need something better. Stronger barrier, alarm, maybe camera, whatever it is. So the monitoring process allows us to be able to see whether you are doing this, and we will provide recommendations accordingly. So ISRS process gives you, tells you, helps you, right, to review and monitor your practices. Once you get all this information, what do you do with it? A lot of times when you do your audit, this is audit finding, this is NC, this is observation, so on and so forth. You take the report, okay, audit completed. You keep the report. Then what do? Wait for the next audit. You need to use this information. So as a part of the ISRS assessment process, you are able to see what are you doing well. If you look at, for instance, leadership, you can see this band. This band tells you, right, compared to all the organizations that are using ISRS, the top scorer is on top, which is green, and the lowest at the bottom. Yeah? And then you see the gray dot line is the average for the industry. It's whether your industry or all industries together. And then you see the yellow diamond, that's where you are at. Okay? So if you look at number 1 over there, yellow diamond above average. So you as an organization for leadership, you are above the average. But you're not the best. The best are others on top. You can see that. Yeah? And from this way, you are able to see which process you want to focus on. The benchmarking puts you across other industry, other players from the same industry, right? And other players across the same kind of processes. You are able to choose when you do the benchmarking process. Right? We have, my last count, I believe almost 300 companies applying ISRS. So you are able to compare yourself across organizations across the world. I have one national oil company client in Indonesia, Pertamina. They are one of the most extensive users of this ISRS. And because the benchmarking is able to show you where you are above average. Oh, I'm above average upon most things, except for some of the elements. So they put in their logo, we are a world-class company because we are above average. So that's one means to show stakeholders how you are compared to everybody else. And part of this benchmarking process gives you a certificate and gives you in detail how you're doing for each process. Because when you look at leadership is element 1, but under leadership there are multiple questions, right? And each sub-questions tells you, okay, I can improve this, I can do better here, I can do better there. So it gives you a very granular look at your performance. It allows you to focus and target at processes which you are weak at and do not touch which you are good at. It also allows you to share the good stuff. I'm very good at this. I can share this to other department, other facility, other factory, and so on. Ultimately, it tells you whether your management system, is it good enough compared to the world? It tells you how do you do compared to everybody else. It tells you how you compare to the rest of the world in general, right? And also tells me, I can tell my shareholders, I can tell my stakeholders, I'm doing well here. And sometimes your stakeholders is who? The regulators, right? KOSHA. Right, so you Korean OHSA, they need to see evidence. Have you been doing your audits? Have you shown improvement in your process? You have a bunch of accidents over the last 2 to 3 years. What have you done to make things better? ISRS allows you to see very clearly your improvement because you follow the PDCA cycle, yes? You plan, you do, you check whether it's okay or not okay. You improve, yes. Oh, you don't improve, okay, we find another solution. So even though if you do not improve, the monitoring process allows you to identify what is working well and what is not working well, and focus and change. So even if you do not improve, you can show that yes, we don't improve, but we find a solution because we don't know, we think this is not working, and we have another solution. So you're showing to your stakeholders a continual improvement process, a thinking process, not just sitting down waiting things to happen. It's very proactive instead of being reactive. Now, ISRS provides like a backbone to all our processes within DNV. You've heard Dr. Lim earlier talking about incident investigation. And the incident investigation process is actually one part of the ISRS tool set. So you are able to use the similar incident investigation processes, training practices in line with the ISRS process, using BSCAT and SCAT, systematic causal analysis technique, which is linked to identifying all your risks, all your hazards, whether it's, again, safety, health, or even business risk, and develop a bow tie. So you can have the bow tie attached to this, and it's all part of the process. And you are part of a global ISRS community. Now, using the ISRS process allows you to tap into the best practices of other companies. You don't see what company, you can see what kind of company and what they do well. It's anonymized in that manner, but you get to share the best practices. So if you think about it this way, you know when they say, you learn from your mistakes. Yeah, when you do something wrong, you learn from your mistakes. But it's better to learn from somebody else's mistake. So before you make the mistake, somebody has gone through this, and they say, oh, we have done this and it failed. You can tap on that information through the ISRS community. We have what you call the ISRS Book of Knowledge. It's like the Wikipedia for ISRS, and you as a license holder for ISRS allowed to get access to the Book of Knowledge. It's regularly updated. I'm not talking every year. Sometimes every week you have a new update because somebody is learning something somewhere in another facility in the UK, in Singapore. All right, so you can apply it accordingly. And then part of the ISRS process requires to have the knowledgeable people to go through specific training. Who are the knowledgeable people? Number one is always senior managers. So there's a management training for ISRS. And then on top of that are the, what we call, if you want to use a comparison to ISO, the internal auditors or the internal assessors. They will go through the MSM2, Modern Safety Management Training, version 2.1. And then they will go through the assessor training. How to be an assessor. It's similar to an ISO training for an internal auditor. However, it goes to great detail on how to identify failings and good practices within the organization. The beauty about ISRS is also the fact that when you do an ISO audit, every time you have to come up with your new questions. What is the questions for clause number 1, number 2, and so on and so forth. For ISRS, it's fixed. Everybody knows the questions. You can use the question over and over again. But you still see results improving. Even though the auditee or the assessee knows the questions, they may not be able to fulfill the requirements. Because why? We don't just need you to say yes or no. Yes, but 50% only knows, or 20% only knows, or 30% in practice. So it allows you to identify the weak and the good and in between, and to focus for improvement. And that is the difference. All right? And these are the major training processes that can support if you, on top of using the ISRS process. Not saying that if you don't use ISRS, you can't have this training. You still can. It still helps to improve your processes. But it adds, because it's a link. So if I were to, as an organization, wants to embark on the ISRS process, what do? There's a straightforward process that you can put in place, or we have put in place. Right? Step 1, we do a kickoff. We assess where you are at. There's a gap analysis, we call it. It's like a mini assessment, but it tells you at what level you are. Because one of the outcomes for the ISRS is to show where you are compared to the rest of the world. How do you compare? The way we compare is using numbers from 1 to 10. If you are ISRS level 1, you are at level 1. At level 10 is the highest. To date, there is no company of the almost 300 companies that we have done assessment have ever reached level 10. I tell you first. Right. There have been a few companies, 2 of them I have worked on, have reached level 9. On average, if you are looking at a world-class organization, you achieve level 7. If you are level 7 after an ISRS assessment, you are up there with the rest of the world. You can compare yourselves to BP or Shell or ExxonMobil or companies like BASF. Yeah? These are the kind of companies who are at level 7. There are organizations who are level 8, level 9. And most of them are nuclear power plant. You must be very high in safety and management of your management systems in a nuclear power plant. Because when you have an accident, people die. Environment is lost. Yes? These kind of organizations are level 8, level 9. So when we do assessment, we will do an assessment using questions at a level 4, level 5 standard, and to see whether are you there yet. So we do the first gap analysis, and part of the process, when we do our assessment, it's not just looking at your documents. It's not good enough. We need to talk to people. People who are doing certain processes, who are doing the risk assessment, who's doing firefighting, who is doing the hiring of people, HR. How do you hire somebody to do a certain work? Do you have a process to manage this? Do you have succession planning in when you replace somebody with somebody leaves or get promoted or go on holiday, you know? So we all look at these processes, and this is all linked to your day-to-day activities. It's very, very in-depth. And then at the end of the process, the assessment itself, we will always see the critical findings that we call. What is noteworthy, what needs to be changed on the spot. So it's not just I do an audit, I come back 1 month later, I give you the report. No, it doesn't work that way. When you do an assessment, you get to see what you can fix straight away. Don't wait for our reports, you can start working on it. So there's a closeout meeting to present the critical findings. So you can straight away work on moving forward. And then, of course, the report comes after that. This way, we will take the time to invest, to talk to you on your process. What is the best way to manage for your company? Because every single company whether they are doing different activities, are unique by themselves. So there are some different ways to do different things. And I can explain with examples later. And then we communicate what we find, and then first we will talk to your managers, the senior management, because they need to have the buy-in. If your management don't agree, you can do whatever you want. Nothing will happen. Right? Because management is the one who decides who will to spend on the resources to make the changes, to make the improvement, to share your findings. You need management support. So they are the key people to communicate with. However, after communicating with management, we also need to communicate to everybody else to continue to improve. Yes? And this is, again, going back to what I said earlier, the PDCA process. We always look at things from multiple perspectives, from the perspective of the managers, the management, the stakeholders, the people on the floor, hence the need to interview. When we do interviews, it's typically one-on-one. We don't want the managers there to be there when we do the interview. It has to be anonymous. When it's anonymous, people are willing to share. At least their concerns are out there. They don't want to see their names, but they want to see their concerns. So the ISRS assessment process allows this to occur. Right? And then you look at every site differently. You may produce product A, but that product can come from different ways, different processes, different methodology. So we look at a size assessment on the different sites, and we do a kind of a survey process where we see what is the best way to do the assessment to get the best out of that assessment process. And then we take into consideration many things, and one of the most important things that over time that we have identified as an organization full of safety professionals or HSE professionals or risk advisory professionals is the human factors. When we look at the workplace throughout the decades from the Industrial Revolution until now, you will notice that when you build a factory to produce a product, you are focusing on the product, but not on the people who are doing the work. So what you end up is that you make people fit the work. Human factors are looking at the work to fit the people. Right? When you look at a simple thing like a hammer, what's a hammer? A head with a stick. You knock it down. When you look at ergonomic hammers, the handle is no longer straight. It's angled to have the proper hand holding. Instead of holding like this, which is very uncomfortable too many times, it's holding like this, which is easy, you can do many times. So that's human factors. Looking at tools and processes to fit the human beings. Because we are human beings, right? We look like this, 2 hands, 2 feet, right? And if you have a tool that you need to reach around to do the work, it doesn't make sense. So we look at how an organization is fitting their processes, their tools, to fit the human being. So it's safer for the person to do work, comfortable to do work. The idea is always when your employee leave the home, the door, and come back home, he needs to come back in the same condition. Yeah? You don't leave the house nice and fresh, come back home. We don't want that. Right? We want them to come back in the same condition. And to be able to do that is to make sure your work environment is conducive for that person. Hence, we look at the human factors as well. Now, one of the other aspect that we are looking at when we do issues, what we find is that talking about clear expectations. Your organization has policies. Policy number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. You must do this. This is the telling part. But sometimes the message that goes down to the people is not very clear. Either the messenger is wrong or the message is wrong. Ultimately, the question we will ask is, what is the message that you want to put across? Safe workplace, healthy workplace, compliant people. Right? That is the message. So we will see what is missing there for the expectations. We try to find those expectations. Sometimes it's not people don't want to follow the rules. They are not sure of the rules. How you communicate the rules. We identify those points and we clarify that. These are some of the things. Another thing that we find is that you have done your risk assessment. You know this is the risk for this hazard, but the controls are not very clear, not defined. And we'll find those things. We are able to see those things, and we will be able to share those things. Another aspect that we find very often, the absence of governance. I don't know whether you heard of this kind of saying. When the cat is away, the mouse come out and play. Yeah? So when the boss is not around, they do whatever they like. The boss come back, everybody good. Follow the rules. We don't want that. We want to have, you would like to have, a system in place to manage your workplace that people will always do the right thing when nobody is looking. That's the ultimate target you will go for. In one of the assessments I did for a logistics platform, it's a 24-hour operations, 45 forklifts working 24 hours. The forklift operation is 24 hours, shift operation is 24 hours, but the manager is 24 hours? No. Manager is only 8 to 5. So they find out every time the forklift is always breaking down on the late shift, always has problems. So what they do? We recommended to have a duty manager process as one of the recommendations to see what's going on actually during the late hours. So one manager from every department, only one, at any time of their choice, between 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., to come and just observe. Don't say anything, just observe. And one of the interesting things that they observed was at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the things are very quiet, the forklift drivers are very bored. So what they do? They race. They race the forklift, like Formula 1, and then damage the forklift. Why? Because nobody is there to see. Absence of governance. So something is wrong in terms of the way they manage. But once they started the duty manager process, where the manager is always there observing at the late hours. One manager, what day? I don't know. But there will be one manager that week to go and see. And they suddenly see the managers there. The managers don't do anything. Just stand there, observe. Not to scold, not to tell you what to do. Just stand and observe. And the number of incidents of damages goes down tremendously. So to identify absence of governance is very typical in the ISRS process that we can see. Another items that you want to move forward, once you have done the necessary assessment and identify what to do first, what to do next. A lot of times, as safety professionals, you will see this week the manager say, I want to do this. We have done this, and then what happens? Everybody forget it. It's a new item, something new. The flavor of the month. How to make things in such a way that you maintain your momentum and you go straight. Setting expectations, targets, and aims. We assist to show what is the easy things to do now. Low-hanging fruit. Very simple. Just to put signboards, just to communicate to certain parties. You don't have cost money. It's just you just tell them and monitor them. So we tell you, this is easy, do this first. This will cost money and time. This do later. You plan. So you can plan your process. You can plan your journey towards excellence. So we set expectations and focus on it. Again, PDCA cycle, yes? You plan to do this. Then once you do it, you check, you monitor. So you allow the process to also monitor those activities so you don't lose momentum. A lot of times, you have the good idea, the good intentions. The problem is, once you hit that intention, they give up. Why? Done already, focus about something else. You want to continue the best practice. Yeah? You want to hear and say the good things and continue to do this, not to stop it. Yes? Oh my, I talk too slow. Then we will develop the roadmap and assist in planning and ultimately define your process. So it's not just, do the assessment, forget. There's no such thing as fire and forget. It's always focused on what to do next, moving forward, what to do next. Almost there. So you can see all these logos. In the picture you can see, some of them very familiar to you. These are all the people who are applying and using ISRS. You can see a lot of oil and gas companies. But there are a lot of companies which are non-oil and gas. Some of the examples I have is outside of oil and gas. This is the prime, actually one of the number one of users of ISRS in Asia. PT Badak LNG terminal in Indonesia. They achieved level 9. It's a long journey. But from a company which is very reactive, they became very proactive. They are all champions of ISRS. You can see from the safety statistics, the numbers, is very clear what is the focus. They come to a point where the people are asking, okay, we have improved this, what else can we do? Proactive people, proactive employees, you have a good performing organization. Suntory, they don't just make whiskey, they make drinks. So this is a food manufacturing company, right? They have many facilities in Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and they are soon to be also in Singapore, and they apply this process. We do the gap, we tell them where you're at, and then they run with it. So ISRS allows us to give you the first look, and then after understanding the first look, they can manage on their own. So it's not a process that you always need us to be there. We're there to support, we're there to show, but you can manage it on your own. Right? As long as the organization is always proactive, not reactive. CNPC. CNPC is a Chinese company. They have operations worldwide now. This is the pipeline process. Same thing we started in 2006. And now we have gone up to 2023. It's not updated here, but they have gone through the LNG business and they followed it from pipeline to process. And they go across their organization. Similarly, in the other business for CNPC, they have achieved from, I think they started at level 3 in 2000 using ISRS version 7, and now they're using version 9, I think. They have reached level 8. Version 8, sorry. So they have gone through this process, and he helped them improve their safety records, the operational records. Another key client, this is an Indian company, Lupin. They are called toll manufacturers. They work for Pfizer, Moderna, all the big companies, and they manufacture drugs. Right? They manufacture drugs under license from all these big companies, and they supply the Indian economy, the Indian market. And they've been practicing this for a very long time. Morrison Utility is a utility company in Australia. They started not so long ago, but they have been doing this ongoing, and they have seen improvement. If you look at the Australian regulations, whether it's offshore or onshore, their regulation is very strict, and they have reached to a certain level where they are up here and they cannot change. So they want to do better. What more can they do? So they've been applying ISRS, and they're improving the safety record even further. So it tells you, ISRS allows you to improve even a so-called good operations, and you need to show stakeholders you're improving further. ISRS can be a tool to do that, and Morrison has done that. This is my baby, personal baby. ISRS is used by the Singapore rail operators, regulators, as a tool to audit their operators. So you have over 100 over lines, right? This is a 7-year project that we have through the metro system of Singapore, right? And the operators for the metro system are being audited by the regulator using ISRS as a tool. They have improved their safety performance tremendously within the last 3 years. Even during COVID, we are able to improve their process. Because metro system is important. COVID, no COVID, the trains must run. People still must go to work. Yeah? So, and we have given a huge value for this. And all these words from actual companies, yeah, we've been practicing it. We've been operating this. And they live by this. We don't tell them what to say. They are telling us what they're saying. So these are true blue operators and users. And that, hey, I've ended. Now, I would like to give the floor for questions if you have any questions. But what I want to express, don't think ISRS as a tool or just to audit and that's it. Because ISRS has a set of information, what we call the ISRS rule book, can be used to be applied and used as means to continually improve your process. And if you have people leaving the organization, the tool is still there. It's easily accessible and it's very easily put in place.